This thunderous or explosive issue, that's absolutely right. I haven't had it referred to as that. But thank you very much for the invite. It's wonderful to be in India again. This is my fourth trip on brand safety business, and I'm always amazed by the energy, the speed to market, so that's just it's just a remarkable digital market. So on to talking about brand safety. 60% of marketers think that brand safety poses a serious risk. And earlier this year, the WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers, did a research which also said that 70% of marketers are more worried about brand safety this year than they were last. And in addition, consumers are now hearing about fake news, disinformation, data breaches, and so the consumer trust in media has never been lower. Edelman did a piece of research that showed that the trust index for media is low. And that's bad news for things like ad avoidance and overall media responsibility. And then we're also fed alarmist headlines like $66 billion worth of global fraud. And you wonder, with all of those three things happening, why our marketers are worried about moving more of their spend into digital and into mobile. So this is a really important issue. The good news is that we have a panel here of really smart, sharp people who are going to help you make more sense out of this. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to dive into some questions that I'm going to ask specifically of each of the panel members. But before we do that, we're going to start discussing things like, or we hope to cover things like accountability in brand safety. Who's responsible? Which executive in the organization will be responsible for brand safety? And is there perhaps even a need to have a policy around brand safety in the organization? So we'll cover some of those kind of interesting and meaty questions in the panel. So, but let's lead off, Safita, as a marketer. The focus on brand safety has been around for several years now. But do you think that as a marketer and in Diageo, that the environment is safer now than it was, say, in 2016? And as an adjunct to that, is there more or less focus on brand safety in Diageo?
Hi, everyone. First of all, good afternoon. Thanks for both those questions, John. So I'll take them one at a time. I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is in India and one is outside. I think the awareness of brand safety in a lot of the Western nations has been there for quite a few more years in the past, including in Diageo. And we've seen how a lot of, therefore, policies, as you called it, a brand safety policy, has been developing for a lot of brands, and I think it's trickling down to India as well. The second axis of our angle of looking at it would be what are brands doing about it? And more importantly, what is the environment helping us to do, right? And what is happening is, and I'm sure more of the panelists will talk about it, today tools and technologies are developing to address the $1 billion of questionable consumer reach that we're talking about. So because of both of that, I think yes, but India is still, I think, lower on the curve. I can take the Diageo one. Coming from a sector like Alcobev, we are very, very conscious of brand safety, probably similar to a few other sectors as well, like financial industry, financial services, or healthcare, because the brands have a lot more to lose when the connotations of it is even remotely not as palatable to a wider consumer group. So we have lots of the usual acronyms inside. So we have something called DMC, the Diageo Marketing Code, which lists out a whole lot of best practices and principles and do's and don'ts. And more importantly, right now we have something called the Trusted Marketplace, or TMP, one more acronym for you, which is actually how do we and all the partners we work with, including some of the eminent speakers who came up before us today, how do we work with them to ensure that our brands continue to remain safe?
So in essence, what we talked about a little earlier is that you do have a policy for brand safety. You do have something, and that's applied globally, right?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So, Amit, kind of Ad Connolly finds it's kind of what you do is you find mobile audiences for marketers. And how do you discuss kind of brand safety, viewability, ad and app fraud with your agency and marketing clients? And how do you keep them safe? What tools are you using?
Hi, everyone. I think I will start with Savita, what she mentioned about in terms of tools. So first, we tell you about how we do that. So when we onboard any partners or any developers on our platform, we do content screening on the first level. Before we put our SDK to monetize in that. And as a tool, we use multiple tools to make sure ad fraud, brand safety, and viewability point of view. And then we allow the SDK integrations, and we start monetizing on that. Before we onboard any advertiser on this, we use tools like Moat, Double Verify, IAS, Tag, which help us to, all the checks and balances in place before we do all those things. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, great. So Anant, kind of, there's a price to pay for brand safety. Our marketing clients grudgingly, our international marketing clients grudgingly pay for measurement, but also preferred marketplaces. There's a premium to be paid there, and this extra price for brand safety and premium supply. How do you justify that to your clients? How do you reconcile the cost of measurement and the lower risk with perhaps a higher out-of-pocket cost when you chat to your clients?
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So I think between ad fraud, brand safety, and viewability, ad fraud and viewability to a large extent at least measurable, and most marketers can relate to them very clearly, right? Because if your ad is not viewable, it means there's no ROI. If you're buying fraudulent impressions, it doesn't make sense. But when it comes to brand safety, the reality is that how do you measure brand safety, right? It's a huge challenge. Of course, theoretically, no marketer will ever say that I want my ad to be seen in a brand unsafe environment. So when we typically meet advertisers, and it's interesting that when we typically get a pitch brief, right? What we're seeing over the last 3 years is that 3 years or 2 years back, nobody even asked you questions about brand safety. A lot of the global brands now include questions on brand safety in their pitch briefs, which means there's obviously rising concern. But when I look at clients in India, we don't find too many conversations being had around brand safety, right? And the only thing we can do as a partner is that right up front when we're dealing with clients is to give them a perspective of how we think they should actually be looking at BAV specifically in all three, and why they should be concerned about brand safety. But like I said, I think the fundamental challenge is that, one, at the client end, I don't think we don't see enough of ownership of brand safety, right? It's currently fragmented who takes a call and who should take the call. And effectively what happens is clients who are spending or starting their journey on digital typically don't want to make the investment in measurement because they can't see the immediate ROI. More evolved clients where advertising on digital is a large part of their spends, they tend to be a lot more focused. And that's where seeing the conversion to using the tools and tech that my panelists spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, Samir, before we get on to you, I'd be interested, Savita, to go back to you and just say, in Diageo, when you look at brand safety, when you see it as an industry, who's responsible for it? Are the publishers responsible for it? Are the agencies responsible for keeping the client's brand safe? Or is there a sense of responsibility inside the organization? Does everybody look at you as the chief media officer saying, you're responsible? Who do we think should be responsible in this ecosystem?
That's a great question, and I wonder about it always. I think it's definitely the brand owners who are the biggest, who are entrusted with this responsibility for keeping the brand safe for their consumers, right? So I think it is definitely, the onus is on the brands, as you rightly said, to actually be aware of it and try to measure it and get to the right outcomes for themselves. But today, it's all of us are in this together. The partners, we, for example, in the Trusted Marketplace, we work with the partners to ensure that all the checks and balances are there. We make tripartite partnerships with some tools and technology players to ensure that all of us are feeling comfortable with it. You're right, there is a cost to getting things right. But if it's important for you and for your product and your consumers, whether measurable or not, you need to be able to build towards it, right? And who's the owner? Well, I think everybody in the firm is the owner. It's not just the person who's looking at digital and media. By the way, brand safety issues can happen offline as well, especially in India, right? On where it's kept, where it's sold, where it's seen, right? So therefore, I would always say one person can champion it, but at least on our end, even our global CEO is part of a lot of, and chairs a lot of global panels on brand safety. So it's all of us in it together.
It's kind of, there's an accountability in the media to deliver brand safe inventory, but it's all of our responsibility, the media agencies and the brands themselves, to keep it safe.
Absolutely.
Great. Samir, so left you last because you're unique in that you're a CMO, but you're also a content aggregator. And so firstly, as a content aggregator, you sit in a kind of an interesting position. So how does your content team control disinformation, harmful content within your organization? You know, I think everybody paints content aggregators with the same sort of brush. And obviously disinformation and fake news is a big issue for everybody. Do you have people or a person directly responsible for brand safety? And are you detecting a concern from marketers around this?
Thank you, John. I'll take both the questions. And I think, thank you for asking me that, because I think it's important to kind of clear the air on that. So first and foremost, and I can speak only for Daily Hunt as of now, Daily Hunt actually doesn't have the same problem of fake news or disinformation at the same level as anybody else, purely because we have technically no UGC on our platform. Absolutely no UGC. No user-generated content comes to us directly on the app. Technically, all our news and content relationships essentially give us the content, which is more than 2.5 lakh pieces a day. All of that is ingested into the system, tagged, sorted, and then displayed. Along with that, specific things such as we don't get a partner on board immediately on day one. There is a gated entry system of a partner on board. That's one. Assuming you were a partner who got on board and you did your reports or your news articles or your videos started suffering from poor quality, language, tonality, they get flagged off, both internally as well as externally, because we are watching and measuring what the consumer is saying. It actually goes back to the publisher as a score, which means you started as a 5-point scale, and because of your quality of coverage, it has dipped now. Now you're a 4-point scale, which directly affects your discoverability or how far up or down do you go on my scale. We also indulge in machine-assisted, man-moderated, format, which means both on text, video, image, all of that. More importantly, I think the user plays a pivotal role as well. He or she gives us direct feedback on stuff he or she likes or does not like on our platform, and we tend to act upon it pretty much ASAP. And last, we have specific algorithms which are NSFW, which essentially mark content not safe to watch, and that straddles across all three, which is text, video, and image. That broadly kind of puts us in a real sweet spot, because predominantly UGC takes care of 80% of our problems. If there is no UGC, we know that we are essentially not getting content which is pornographic or promotes any sort of racial tension, no language bias. All of those are kind of pretty much weeded out if you don't have UGC. Coming to the second question that you asked me, specifically as a marketeer, and I agree to Savita, there is not a single day that any marketeer worth his salt will ever agree to be available in a not brand safe platform. But honestly, we are seeing the big guns or the big clients move first. Like like Diageo, I can name a couple of big clients who've seriously started making investments, policies, documentation that they want us to follow, which we as a publisher / partner need to adhere to when we start taking. But we are not seeing the same level of sensitivity, to Anand's point again, on smaller clients. I think they're still getting a hang of it. But as Savita rightly said, brand safety concerns are available both online and offline. And it is the collective responsibility of the organization to ensure that one doesn't fall into trouble.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like you also put a big emphasis on professionally produced content, but also on the onus of the content producers themselves to control brand safety. And the more that they do that, the more they get rewarded with advertising.
Absolutely.
Right?
So, see, it's a win-win for all, because our model essentially, we don't produce a single iota of original content. We are an AI ML powered content discovery platform. We essentially ingest 2.5 lakh content pieces a day. And let's say, I'll take any example. Let's say there's an India-Pakistan match that's currently happened and reporting is happening. Because we have multiple partners, each one of them are reporting the exact same thing. So how do I ensure who goes up and who goes down? That comes essentially from speed of delivery, quality of reporting, accuracy, how fast, all of that. And that's directly tied to their remuneration and the discovery that they get on my platform. So it's a win-win for all, and that's how we ensure that they are vested with doing the correct thing for our audiences.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to come back to, and I know that you've all come to listen to my esteemed panelists here, but going back to the issue of who's responsible. An interesting thing happened in the ad festival in Cannes in June, where Diageo was one of the founders, together with Unilever, together with Mars and a couple of other clients, as well as Group M, and they formed something called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM. And if you don't know about it, there's a ton of stuff that has been written about it. And what that is the entire industry taking responsibility for suitable and safe content on social platforms. And for the first time, they're calling it an uncommon collaboration, but for the first time, you have all clients through the WFA and the ANA, all agencies, and I mean all of the network agencies, all of the associations, including the platforms and publishers, all sitting around a table at the same time, talking about this issue of brand safety. And why that's important is that you've had well-meaning organizations like Group M approaching the big platforms about their concerns around brand safety, but so have the other agencies, and so have other major clients, and so have other major organizations. And so there's been a fragmented approach to brand safety. And now, for the first time, what GARM has done is it's got everybody talking around the table. And I think, thanks to the initiatives of clients like Diageo and Mars and Unilever. But so it's on the area of responsibility and who should be involved. It's absolutely everybody. It's key. Of course, we're keeping the publishers responsible for delivering safe content, but everybody's taking responsibility for fixing this. Anant, I want to come back to one of the comments that we made here when in chatting to our teams. It's clear that the level of sophistication in the Indian market in terms of the tools that are available to us for brand safety, a lot of that is driven by our international clients. But when we talk to our teams and we talk about local clients, and you mentioned it a little bit, they're not there yet. What will it take to get Indian clients to kind of adopt some of certainly the tools, the technology, but also accept the fact that you may not be able to buy the cheapest impression. The cheapest impression is not necessarily the safest impression. How do we cross that hurdle, or do you think that the clients have a point? Do you think that brand safety may be too expensive?
So I'd love to say education, more forums like this. But I think the truth is that I think the community needs to be shaken out of their current way of operating. I think in 2017, this happened in Britain, when media started writing about brands whose ads were appearing on unsafe content. When that happened, I think that changed the discourse in the entire community. And for the first time, brands started now pushing publishers and asking them about what are they doing to improve brand safety. And that's when a lot of brands started investing in technology like IAS, Moat, even DoubleClick. So I think the reality is this. I think let's face it, businesses are under pressure to deliver ROI. That's the conversation you have. If you're a performance marketer, you're just looking at bottom of the funnel, you're looking at CPMs, you're looking at ROI. Affiliate marketing is a very large part of your business. You don't even know what's happening with your advertising there. And I think we can say that everybody is responsible for it. But I think at the end of the day, as a brand, you had at maximum risk to lose not just on brand reputation, but there's a legal and financial implication as well, which is going to hit the brand and the business first. And it'll have a ripple effect on the partners. So I honestly think, unfortunately, I think unless there is serious consequences for a brand and it starts becoming a part of conversation, I think only then more brands will take notice. I think until then, I think having a conversation about it, pushing your agency partner, and I think that's really important for brands to do because your brand and business is at maximum risk. Push your agency partner to bring quality inventory, push them to bring the best technology. And I think for marketers, the challenge is to upwards, to be able to educate their ecosystem about the repercussions of not spending that 2 or 3% extra, or whatever it is, to ensure a brand safe environment to advertise in.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, Samir, Savita, on that point, we know that you're under pressure to buy as efficiently and effectively as you can. You're both major advertisers in this market. You spend a great deal of money. Are your procurement guys who are pushing for market efficiency, are they starting to understand that the cost of an impression, in other words, are we measuring CPMs at our risk, or should we be measuring the safe reach, in other words, the viewable, fraud-free, in context and suitable reach, or is there too much pressure from your procurement guys? What we find from our investment guys, whenever there's a new pitch, we get put under huge pressure to deliver CPMs, and I keep on saying CPM against what? Because the lower the CPM goes, the more risk there is at the bottom there, and the higher the CPM, of course, the better quality inventory and the more it should work. But it's a difficult conversation, isn't it? Do you want to comment on that first?
Absolutely. I think you're right, but there is, at least in our minds, no trade-off, right? The brand safety guidelines come first, and then there are always ways of figuring out how to be efficient after that. But there can be no trade-off with respect to brand safety. So it's a great challenge to have. Our procurement guys, as I said, own brand safety along with us. So, well, the challenge for them is how to get the CPMs lower given all these guardrails. And I think they understand it, and that's what I think makes our lives interesting every day.
Samir.
Actually, first I must concede that the pressure is real. Okay, and I think, but there is one interesting part where I think my media team kind of understands this problem equally well, which is they know that, cheap is not eventually the best. That's one. Secondly, I think they're equally, as partners, they understand that, look, in our business, which is the publishing business, trust is of paramount importance. You violate it once, you're not going to get that. So for us, we are very conscious about the same fake news piece. Similarly, very, very conscious about how we advertise, where we advertise, to get the audiences on board. So I think a balance is important. But as Savita said rightly, eventually when push comes to shove, we will err on the side of caution and will not go for that additional cheap inventory just because we need to reach a number, because the damage technically will be far more than that measly 2, 3, 5% that we are talking about.
Yeah, what we're doing some work around the world now. In fact, as much as possible, we're calling it quality sells. And what we're trying to prove is not only does buying brand safe inventory reduce risk, so as Anand said, that sometimes these risks to the brand are huge. The reputational risk, it's just almost so costly you can't measure it. But at the same time, we're proving that if you buy quality inventory from the right suppliers if you use the right tools and if you mitigate against it, you know, the ads work. And I mean, go figure, this is not a genius. You don't need the genius. If more of your ads are viewable and if fewer are applied to fraud, obviously it'll start working better. And so I think it's as media and as marketers in this room, what we should be doing is working towards proving that better quality inventory bought from trustworthy suppliers actually works better and is more effective. So yes, you have to spend a few cents measuring it, and quality inventory will cost you more than bottom of the barrel network inventory, but it's not going to work as well at the end of the day. And I think that's something that we can all work towards. What do you think, Amit?
So my take is, I think as a marketer, as a audience platform, I think if you buy a right CPM in terms of viewable CPM in a brand safe environment and in terms of ad fraud point of view, if you're using the right tool and technology in the place, you're getting a better ROI. That's very important. And I think global brands are already start using it, all the tools. And I think local brands has to also look up on those tools, how efficient are they, and it will increase your potentials in terms of ROI point of view.
Great. Well, what do you think might be next for you guys? Anand, just in terms of the discussions that you're having with your clients, where do you think it might go in the future for India? I'm happy to tell you what's happening internationally, but I think people are here to hear what you want to see in India. How do you, in closing, where do you think we're going to go in the next year or year and a half?
So look, I think that there's a lot more awareness today. Like I said, if you just look at pitch briefs, the first time you see brand safety questions being given coming in an RFP, which is a good sign. It means that somebody in the organization has kind of raised the question and said, is the partner capable of handling this dynamic, complex, and very, very challenging environment? So I think the first step has been taken. I think what we'd love to see in India is, potentially we have a advertiser community, we have a publisher community, and we have the agency community. And I think something like the Global Alliance for Safer Media that's been created, I'd love to see something like that happening in India, where there's a lot more progressive work happening. I think currently individual brands are doing what they can to protect themselves. But if you look at India and you look at the number of apps, the number of platforms being launched that are creating a lot of consumer interest and are creating potential advertising platforms, I think it's important for the industry to kind of come together and start creating tough standards for everyone to operate within, right? I think, to my mind, ad safety is just not about brands. It's also about consumers. It's also about the future and younger consumers, especially because more and more younger people have phones and connected devices in their hands. And I think there's a larger responsibility that we have towards society to make sure that we only support publishers and platforms where the content is safe.
Yeah, I think that the people in this room and particularly on this platform have a lot of power to change the situation in terms of rewarding publisher partners who offer quality brand safe inventory. What we found around the world is in having discussions with our publisher partners is we say, these are our brand safety standards. Can you deliver against them? And if you do deliver against these, we'll get our clients to shift more money to your platform. And I don't have the numbers for this year, but last year, our partners who assured us that they would share quality brand safe inventory with us grew their business with us by 14%. Those who were not able to didn't grow their business at all. And that's the biggest incentive that we can offer our partners, is actually driving more investment to those platforms.
I think that makes sense. I was about to say the same. You'll probably do a lot better to introduce it yourself, even I think with clients who may not be thinking about it, and that's possibly going to be your differentiator, and you will show more that you care about the brands and whom you are working with. So yes, it doesn't always have to be initiated by the brand. Why not from the agency partners and from any of the technology players as well?
Yeah. Samir, how do your closing comments?
I think, honestly, it's a win-win for all. There is no downside to this conversation. And, Anand was saying that, education and all of that, and the fact that it started appearing in, RFPs, I think, in my opinion, what I've seen in India is there has to be one large fiasco. One large fiasco kind of really kind of jolts all the other guys
I know.
to kind of get their act together. And I think, I don't wish it on anybody, but I think that's generally a good starting point for India because it kind of prompts everybody to go back and start asking questions. And minute that question gets asked, I think everything else kind of, seamlessly falls in place.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys have been absolutely fabulous. I would just close by saying that brand safety is not just about limiting risk, but it really is about making advertising work harder and be more effective. So a big thank you to this
Thank you,
panel,
John.
and thank you all for your attention.